This is probably one of the most haunting image I have from a educational TV show. The sighting of these men blasted away by the last surviving rocket, fleeing the Earth right before its destruction, is quite impactful indeed. And even though Once Upon a Time Man was produced at a time of some sort of optimism regarding the future, especially before so many countries having a slower growth and neoliberal politics slowly chipping away the middle class, the feel that humanity was to destroy its home was present nonetheless. And today this comes with the return of mercantilism that I already spoke about in another video. This idea that since resources are limited, the power is to obtain exclusivity not only leads to conflict but to overexploitation. The Arctic is extremely resourceful, not only because it has not been exploited yet, but also due to its varied accessibilities. And if it contains very basic materials like copper, it is also a place where we can find many rare earths which our contemporary society relies on, but most importantly, what the new AI society will rely on, if that ever happens. In this shorter video, I'm going to explore the different resources that Arctic has, but not only their use, but also the impact of their exploitation locally, but also worldwide. Of course, when talking about resources, one of the most obvious ones are mineral resources found in the deepest layer of continental crust. In the Arctic Circle, extraction is mostly done in open-air mines, using titanic drilling machines in order to expose the mineral to air and extract them easily, instead of digging galleries that often use child labor in other places. Those mines are not without any consequences. Of course, in order to create a mine, there is a need to destroy everything on its path, be it a forest, and in the case of Russian Arctic, one of the most precious forests found on Earth, namely the taiga, but also places of living, and this has been the case many times, even outside of the Arctic Circle. However, there are other types of mining that could be possible in the Arctic in the future, namely deep sea mining, using a complex mechanism that uses a remote control extractor on ocean floor. This method, however, has not been tested that much, so the impact on marine wildlife are quite difficult to understand, as even though sea is full of life, those areas are not the most populated, unlike shallow reefs. The most relevant thing here are the uses we find in those minerals extracted in the Arctic, and most of them represent important part of our daily lives, from cobalt to copper and other minerals used in electronics. For countries that seek technological power, this is indeed an essential place, and that's why the US tried to seize Greenland, for example. Still, the battle has just only begun, and it will be important to see how this evolves in the future, knowing not only the consequences, but also the reasons. Well, if of course minerals were important, probably oil is the most important for now, and especially on the Russian side. There are various projects found in the Arctic Circle related to hydrocarbons, but one of the most important is the Yamal Peninsula oil field that also does natural gas. That can sound a bit paradoxical compared to what I said earlier on minerals that are essential to future technologies, whereas Gas and oil are seen as quite archaic by now, even though most energy comes from it. But this is not paradoxical at all, and as Jean-Bastien Ferros precises, this is only a symptom of the Thanatocene era that follows Anthropocene. This idea of accumulation of technique that don't really replace each other's. This is not a case of creative destruction, but of pure accumulation. The Japanese side has been quite interested for long in this project, and prestigious groups like Mitsui have invested quite a lot in the Yamal Peninsula. However, due to US sanctions, this has been more and more difficult for Japan to justify its approach. However, Japan never really stopped being interested in those projects and continues buying Russian gas and oil, despite other sanctions and war in Ukraine. And I imagine that many Japanese politicians are waiting for the war to end, as well as investors from the different keiretsu. More importantly, as said in the first video, the Arctic is also safer related to geopolitical tension, as each country almost directly controls its access to the sea, unlike the case of the Gulf, where different opposed states have conflict quite often. However, I believe this is only a temporary matter, and should Arctic be even more developed in the future, conflict and piracy will follow, thus making it as dangerous as the Horn of Africa and the Persian Gulf. In any case, here in the Arctic it's more about a question of access than a question of abundance. And speaking of abundance, or more like the lack of abundance, there is one resource we have completely forgotten in this debate. A resource quite often forgotten is the human resource, and I can already start by saying that humans are resource is extremely dehumanizing. However, this is how they are understood in some sort of economic science, I believe. The Arctic being one of the least populated regions, this can be seen as quite strange, but this is not antithetical. Russia, for example, has taken many native population in order to make good workers of them, proposing a more luxurious lifestyle to them, be it in mines or in oil fields, compared to their more frugal lifestyle they had since millennia. The consequences here are pretty direct. It not only reduces the population that is able to transmit this tradition, but also slowly make them seem out of fashion and decay next to oblivion. If central states have been known for quite a long time to eradicate local culture, even federal states are able to make traditional lifestyle go completely extinct. However, this is not to just blame the Russian. The US is also responsible in some sort. Nowadays, with mercantilism going full speed, there is also this idea of replacing the state and creating world dedicated to a certain elite that would be managed like a company instead of a state, creating some sort of Riviera project like in Greenland. However, this type of lifestyle needs an extreme amount of human labor, and AI is not yet to replace them. Therefore, there is the risk that Arctic population are going to be exploited for the lifestyle of a few. But this is probably not the most important, as states are quite resilient. Therefore, the immediate exploitation is probably more important than fictional scenarios. The risk of losing tradition And this population is not just about preserving ancient culture for the sake of preservation. As said in other videos, the insight, the knowledge, and simply the vision of this population is probably essential to the preservation of the region and can allow decision makers to create sustainable use of resources in the Arctic, as of course many need these resources for simply improving their already difficult lifestyle, but also for more visible application of such technologies such as the one found in medicine, but also transportation. The negative side of thanatophene, of this endless accumulation, has probably another side of the coin, be that this temporary exploitation is only but to replace polluting technology in order to create more sustainable civilization. Of course, this goes away from the framework of thanatophene and empirical evidence that no technology truly replaces another, especially regarding energy. But still, this is one path to explore, and here the human resource, the human intellectual resources, is essential to this process. Whereas Japan has invested in mining and also oil extraction, it has not tackled the human resource field in this region. However, Japan has already the structure to train and also extract the intellectual resources from different skilled workers, and this could be the case in the future should more exchange happen between Japan and Russia should this endless war in Ukraine end once and for all. Without the shadow of a doubt, this is probably one of the most difficult topics to tackle in the Arctic, as this population have extremely poor representation, and as someone from none of these communities, I believe I lack quite a lot of knowledge on them, and these blind spots are admittedly quite frustrating to see. This is also a topic I would like to go back to with more experience, not only academic but also the human experience. To conclude on this Arctic resource video, one of the key points here is that unlike the exploitation of Amazonia or even the cobalt mine in Congo, this one is less visible as the land appears already completely dead, whereas it is full of life. And most importantly, those populations don't have a voice that's heard in mainstream medias. Not to mention that they don't even have a proper state, and Greenland, despite being its quite independent constitutive nation of Denmark, it is still bound to Copenhagen. The issue here is also the sustainability of such exploitation, but as I said in another video, the lack of knowledge from decision makers is critical here, as they are often bought by lobbies, but also they are in a material situation that allows them to ignore the consequences of climate change, for example. On the Japanese side, finally, Arctic appears as a new lifeline, as South China Sea, where most of its resources pass by, is increasingly becoming a zone of conflict that for some strategies could become a war zone in the near future, especially with the conflict over Taiwan. However, quite paradoxically, for a lifeline, the effort put in this line and the reasons could actually destroy what Japan was trying to maintain, just like if the efforts to fill a need actually destroyed entirely the person who was in the situation of need. I hope to come back on this topic for another videos, and especially on more precise mineral exploitation, as I believe each element of rare earth deserves its own video. As always, I hope this video was suitable for your questions, and don't hesitate to ask more in the comments, as well as subscribing for future videos. In any case, see you soon.